contained.
Yeah.
I feel that way too. If I had my hair in a top knot, I would be wearing it.
I got a blowout. It's definitely not my best option. Okay, we're good to go.
Hi, Kenzie.
Hello.
I'm so excited you're here.
I'm really excited.
So this is what I want to share with you. I very rarely feel my age. And in my intense research of you, I feel my age.
Oh my gosh.
I say, listen, I've lived, I'm colored, I live. But the other thing I was thinking about, the depth of what I want to talk about today is so much. But the thing I was actually thinking about was, who my audience is. And, the beauty of analytics is, right? And my audience is people my age. And people my age, people struggling with some kind of, food, eating stuff, addiction stuff, that's what your craving's all about, right? It's all about what's underneath that. We're so tired of talking about that. We want to talk about the real stuff. And I just think you have such an interesting perspective to share with us today because as I was thinking about my life, I was like, how many 20-somethings do I actually know in my life that I'm not necessarily their therapist? I think the answer is 2 or 3. And I think, well, also I just want to say, because we're filming this or we're recording this and we just recorded, I was just on Kenzie's podcast, so go listen to it because we just had the best conversation. You're also one of those people who's not actually your age. You're 400.
Thank you. People have always said that. And I say I'm either 75 or 17. It depends on the day.
I to say I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah.
But maybe not in a room with you. Can you just update us on who you are real quick? Because I just want my audience to know. And I love this. You're such a therapy lover, and I really, really want to talk about that.
Yeah. I say my therapist said 17 times a day.
I know. People have Molly said shirts in their families.
Stop. That's so good. Yeah, my name is Kenzie. I'm 24. I live in Dallas, Texas. I started on YouTube when I was 16. And then I moved to LA for about 4.5 years, started my podcast with Dear Media, graduated college last year.
Yeah. But I love this idea that you were in therapy at the 5th grade. Can you tell us that one?
Yeah, so it was court mandated.
I was just waiting for that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great. I like your bio. I like your stats. But the old soul stuff, I think, comes from that, right? I mean.
Yeah. So my parents had a really, really bad divorce when I was in the 5th grade. It should have been a Lifetime movie. We should have made some money off of that one, There's
still time.
No, at this point, I'm I should pitch a show. But it was a really, one of the most, tumultuous divorces to this day I think I've heard of. Wow. It was rough, and it went on for, I don't even know if they were officially divorced for, 2 or 3 more years after that. It was just a really rough time. So that's when, my journey with therapy started. It was, actually court mandated. I fact-checked that recently because I said that on someone else's podcast, and I'm like, is that one of those things that your parents just lie to you about, But then I texted them. Turns out it was true.
Yeah, no, it's not.
It really happened. So, yeah, I was in therapy. I mean, I had some good therapists. I had one named Sandra, and she was just not my fave. She was not very nice. She was not very helpful. To this day, our family talks about her. She just... I don't know.
It's a funny thing about therapists, though, because I think we get super idealized. And my best friend Michelle is also a therapist, and we always say well, we're not really sure if we're really good therapists or there's just super bad therapists out there.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is I don't know. I like driving a Porsche. I don't like driving a Lamborghini. Not everybody's for every. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just while we're up. The other thing is therapists are not mind readers. And so often people say to me, should I break up with my therapist? And I'm no, tell them what's wrong before you break up with them. We can't read everything. We're not magicians,
And also who knows, maybe if I went to this girl now, I would like her more.
Right.
It's one of those things. But I say that because I hear that all the time with my friends when I'm talking hey, maybe you should go to therapy and not trauma dump on everyone that you know. And they're oh, I tried it once and I didn't like it. It's well, you have to find the right therapist for you too.
Absolutely.
I got very lucky with my last one. It was just one and done. But you still sometimes have to look around.
But I think
don't
this
throw
is
it away.
Well, also the immediacy of our culture is oh, I don't like her. I guess I'm not for therapy. There's just no part of us that's oh, maybe I'll interview a few therapists. You know what I mean? So did that inform? Because you have this podcast, you have this whole thing, and you're super into mental health, things like that. And I really want to talk about that. And I really want to talk about body image. And the other thing I really want to talk about is your social media presence, because I'm just fascinated by how much you share about yourself and how exhausting does that feel Where do you want to start? You choose.
Let's start from the top. What was
Dealer's
the first
choice.
one?
Dealer's choice.
Mental health.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so the one thing, I mean, my parents are great in so many other ways, but the thing I think they did the best job on is talking to us about mental health. So from a very young age, my dad, and it runs in my family. Like, I actually don't have a family member who doesn't struggle with some sort of mental health. Maybe like 2 or 3, but it's runs deep in my family. And my dad has struggled a lot with anxiety. And so he noticed it in me like very young and could just tell, like, even when I talk about like being so hard on myself and just like kind of running myself dry, like I was recreating things that my dad had already done. So he was very kind of quick to point it out, and they were very quick to like let me get help. And it was always a very open conversation. So I really feel for people who I was never something that I was ever like ashamed of or couldn't talk about.
How did they do that? You know, it's so funny. Like, a lot of what my people talk to me about, adults that I treat, talk about like being worried about their kid's eating disorder. What do I say? What do I say? What do I do? How do I help? And I even had these people who wrote a book on sort of eating disorders in children on the show. And so many people DM me and were like, I'm too scared to listen to it. Right? Because they were like so scared that they were doing it wrong, that they weren't parenting right. And it's like, how in the world did you experience like them putting you into therapy as a gift and not as something was wrong with you? Or did you experience it that way?
By the time I went to therapy, well, I was only in the 5th grade.
Yeah, that's a baby.
And we were forced though. So I didn't want to go at that time. I was so bitter and hated everyone in my family besides my dad. Like, that wasn't an easy thing. I think we just had conversations about anxiety throughout my whole life. Like, I don't look at it as them having ever done anything intentional about it, even though I know that they did, like, obviously. But it was just always a conversation that was had. And I knew from, like, I can even remember so vividly being, like, 7 and having, like, anxious thoughts. And I remember, like, the feeling so well. And that's just not, I look at now, my niece is 6, and I'm like, I cannot imagine, like, that's crazy that I felt that way.
Isn't it?
It's wild. But I don't know, I had to go to therapy, but because we'd already had so many conversations before that about mental health, it wasn't something that, like, I didn't want to go, but I think it helped me kind of get over going.
Well, I love that. So what you're saying is there was, like, for better or for worse, just this huge transparency about people's struggles. I think so many people, listen, I think your sick is your secrets, right?
Yeah.
And so it sounds like there weren't that many secrets. And so you kind of knew things were screwed up in the house. And then you knew people were struggling with mental health. And then you knew that there was a solution. I'm remembering this patient once, and she had a son that was in inpatient treatment and then a son who wasn't. And she was working so hard to, like, quote unquote, protect the son that was home from what was going on with the kid. And I said to her, like, don't you think he knows? Like, don't you think it would be easier and better for you if you were just more transparent? Like, yeah, I'm struggling too, and I miss him. Like, people think that putting on a good face and putting on a show helps. But as you're explaining it, them not putting on a show maybe saved your life.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot that happened that I was told and I was exposed to that I wish didn't happen. Like, I wish I was definitely, like, more protected in that, not in that sense. I think that like, you already know what's happening. I think the secret's there.
Right.
Make it more tense.
But you weren't like, oh, wow, you guys don't like each other? That's fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like, I don't know. I think there was definitely, it's a give and take. Like, there's parts of it that I wish I was more protected from. But on the other end, I, again, like, have empathy. I feel like I have a lot more, like, emotional intelligence, I think, but because of being forced to go and just grateful for it. My parents, it was just always an open conversation. Way more, my dad dealt with it a lot worse than my mom does, or did. I mean, depending on the time of life. But when it started, my dad was always the one. But he just saw it with me.
But I'm just thinking, my listener right now, okay, like, if you have your notepad out, it's like, be more transparent with my children about what is actually happening. I mean, I just always think, like, truth is a love language. I think this idea of, like, validation, like, we talk about it, it's such a buzzword, but validation is actually, like, its true definition is actually rooted in the truth.
Yeah.
Right? When you're validating somebody, you're saying, wow, that is really hard. That's me saying, oh, I see your truth, not like you're going to be fine. That's invalidating. If you're sitting here saying to me, I'm really struggling, and I'm like, you're going to be fine, that's actually invalidating.
Yeah.
If I say to you, that sounds really hard, I'm not trying to fix it. So that's really hard. You're like, oh, yeah, because I'm seeing the truth in you. And it sounds like when people are trying to hide things, I don't know. Are you like this? When people are acting like nothing's wrong and I know that something's wrong.
It's my least favorite thing in the entire world.
It drives me crazy.
It's actually my biggest pet peeve.
Oh my God, we're like soul sisters.
I really hate it. I
want to strangle people. I'm much more aggressive. I have a lion inside of me, but
I can think too back to being younger and my dad just talking to me about what anxiety was. Like, for example, from preschool on, I would get myself ready. I would make my own breakfast and stuff. Like, they would have certain things so I could do it myself. And I would be at the door with my backpack on, outfit ready, waiting. I don't even know if my mom was awake at that point. Like, I was just always, and that was rooted in anxiety. That was me being like, okay, I have to go. I have to be ready. I have to be in control, whatever.
Right.
And so I think my dad was like, oh, there's something going on, and just would talk about what it was. So I had a really good understanding of what anxiety actually was, rather than him being like, oh, you have a problem, Yeah.
No, like, I always call myself a wounded healer, right? The only reason I'm perceivably good at what I do is listen, I have good training, but the real deal is because I've like seen it, I've done it, I've been through it, and now I'm like on the other side wanting to help people. And it sounds like you're of the same ilk.
Yeah.
So you have this big platform. I think this is what people want to know about your parents that are listening. And it's like, what kind of responsibility do you feel like on this platform? You have so many followers, so many people listen to what you have to say. Like, how do you do it?
I think I've also been doing this since I was 15, 16. I don't know life without that anymore. My normal friends who like don't put their lives on the internet, because that's not a normal thing to do. Actually, kind of it is now, I guess. Right? Yeah. But they have like private Instagram accounts and post once a year. And it's like, because I took the photo, like, it's like a photo I sent them to post. They asked that. It's something, it's almost like, it feels like second nature to me at this point. It feels very oddly normal. Again, I've said this in the past year, I've definitely pulled back, and I do share a lot of my life. I don't share everything. Like, it's easy to say like, oh, and I think I do share a lot, and I think I share a little bit more than like someone who's just primarily on Instagram, maybe just because it's, long form like podcast, video, whatever. But there's so much of my life that is like not on the internet. My entire social life at home is not on the internet. And at times I feel like there's just different phases of my life where I've been more open and then I've held back more. But as far as responsibility, I think, again, I'm someone who values authenticity so much. So and I'm not someone who, I don't process well. Like, if I'm going through it, processing online with like a million people, that's like not what I want to do. But when I'm on the other end of it, like with the breakup, it's like, I will talk about that now, because I wish when I was going through a breakup, someone that I followed on the internet or listened to or whatever would talk about what they did, how it got better, things like that, and were a little bit more open.
Do you ever worry that what you're putting on is sending a message that your life looks better than it does?
Yes.
What do you do with that?
So it's hard, because you also don't want to sit there and be like, I'm so miserable.
No, I know. I had the same thing happen to me. I was like, all my things was just like these beautiful little bows of a story. And I'm like, this is literally not who I am. It's like part of my cell is like, I'm as screwed up as you are. Let's try to do it together. You know what I mean? But like, because I think it's really easy. I mean, I think everybody listening, even like my sweet little Facebook people, are like just putting up the greatest hits of this, the greatest hits of this, the greatest.
It's a highlight reel.
Yeah. And I think it's making us really sick.
I agree. And it's one of those things that I've really struggled with, because on one end, like I said, I don't process well. I'm not the person who's going to be crying on my Instagram story. That's just not how I process it.
And also, I'd like to say, I'm so glad for that too. This thing is so confusing, right? Like, if you were doing that, I'd be like, can she stop? She needs to not show everybody
Exactly. So it's hard, because it's like, on one end, I don't want to just show a highlight reel, but also like, I'm going to do what's the healthiest for me. But I will say, like, I am so transparent about my 23rd year of life was so awful. Like, I was so miserable. I was very depressed. Like, I talk about that a lot.
What were you posting during the 23rd year of life? Were you
in vlogs? It was pretty apparent that I wasn't that happy. And it's also like, I'm a very expressive person. I'm very outgoing. I'm very loud.
I safely can say that. Yeah. Because we're sitting in a room together, which is such a treat.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm having such a good time.
I know, me too. This is the best date I've ever gone on.
It's really going great. But it's one of those things where it was very apparent, and I would say I'm not in the best place right now. There were certain things that I would share, but there were other things that I wouldn't. There's been like grief in my life in the past 3 years that has been in my immediate family, and that also is something that for me, it's I'm sure one day I will talk about it more, but it's been one of those things where like that's not the healthiest move for me.
Yeah. Side note, therapist hat, like that's unprocessed grief. It's not supposed to be, you're processing it.
Exactly. So it's things like that I will say that, but I think it doesn't matter what you do. It's always, you're only going to see the best on Instagram. And I try my best to be like, it's not always like this. I was actually really miserable. I isolated myself from all of my friends. Thank God they still like me. Like, it's like, yeah. I try to talk about that, but like, it's not my, my Instagram profile.
I think this is like my whole question because I'm in the midst of this, just like, I just want to kill diet culture right now. And I think, and I think also I have these 5 godchildren that I'm just dumb in love with, and they're getting older, and I'm watching. I mean, you're just this like wonderful little ray of light sitting in this conversation with me. And I think, when our brand is ourselves, and I have the same thing, except for I just scale older, which I think is different. Like, what do you do with that, right? Like, what do you do with taking care of yourself, what you're putting out there, the influence you have on others? Like, what do you do with all of this influence and trying to, I mean, does it, I know the answer to this, but I also have to ask it, like, does it matter to you?
Yes, it's also can really screw you up. Like, obviously, I think I again, like, I don't know life without it at this point. And one thing I will say is who I surround myself with is the most important decision I make every single day. Yeah. And I've noticed that more so in the past year. I grew up in the suburbs of Dallas, and most of my friends from home, people I've reconnected with, friends I've had since I was 8, that's who I spend most of my time with. And so they've known me for way longer than I had a YouTube channel, like way before. And so it's never, I feel like I actually have a really nice balance that I don't necessarily believe exists.
But what about the messaging to others? I'm so happy about that.
Yeah.
But then you have this huge platform, 88,000 followers on Instagram, like whatever the YouTube is, like more than that. Like, you do have such a soul. I guess I wonder how you balance like what you're putting up versus what's going on versus these like my 11-year-old goddaughter being obsessed with you, and then what she's seeing that maybe isn't true or is true in the moment, or because you're processing the grief, you're putting the best stuff out there. I don't have these problems, and I know like I think about this all of the time about the influence we have on others and just this responsibility we have. And like, I just wonder how you do it.
I'm mindful of not posting certain things, knowing that young girls follow me. So I'm careful with that. As far as
what are you careful with?
Like, honestly, when it comes to food, like, I think that's probably the first thing. I don't necessarily know if I'm careful with anything else. I'm sure there are things, but I just can't, like, I'm just careful with what I post.
Yeah.
And then also, I'm really big on like creating community. So I'm very quick to be like, look, even honestly, you should look into the Geneva app because I replaced my Facebook groups.
I really am hearing that.
All she's actually the founder is coming in after you. Wow. Yeah, but it's really, really great. I love that app. Anyways, making community and making people feel almost like seen and heard, like they have a friend. When I started watching YouTube when I was younger, again, like tumultuous family life, it was my escape, and that was kind of like a community that I found, and then I started my channel. And so I don't know. I am also, I think, a lot more, I don't want to say like relatable, because I think my job, my career, all that, it's not necessarily the most relatable thing, but I think who I am as a person is very relatable. So I don't want to create this like unattainable lifestyle to where people can't connect with me, because like to me, that's not the point.
But aren't we sort of doing that sometimes?
Yes, but I mean people who are creating like a false narrative online. Like what I share is actually my life.
Right.
You know, I don't do things just to like post an Instagram photo. If I post an Instagram, it's because I was doing it in my real life anyways. But it definitely does, especially with like cancel culture in the past few years. I my anxiety and when I feel like my friends and I are talking about that. I'm like, I felt like I lost like part of my personality because you're so afraid of like getting canceled for saying like you like apples and someone else likes oranges.
Well,
you know
something really crazy?
Yes.
I was not going to talk about this on our podcast because I was scared of what Dear Media would think. I was scared, like, and I was just like, enough of it, like enough. Like this is what I think people who are my listeners like want to hear about. Like who cares? Like I was like not going to say it in an aggressive way to you, but I think like you have this thing that all of us kind of like 20 years older than you are like curious about, like you're shaping culture. I mean, you're especially like your brand and how it's mental health and there's this and there's body, there's all this stuff. And it's like, I was like, if I don't sit and talk to her about this, what's the point of my life? What's the point of my podcast?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's, I think I have very close friends that have been people in cancel culture and have, I've seen the other end of it. I think the thing that worries me the most about cancel culture, I don't know if this is the most, but one of the things that worry me the most is that I don't know when we've lost the art of being able to change our minds or making a mistake. And I'm not defending people. Like, I'm not defending actions. Just on a grand scheme, I just think we should be able to change our minds and we should be able to make mistakes. And now that we've gone so far on one end of they're canceled, we hate them, and then all of a sudden, I mean, they don't end up in great places. Like, it's not good for them either.
Well, you and I just had the most lovely, longest conversation about self-forgiveness and self-compassion, and it does not jive with cancel culture. There's no ability to be vulnerable. There's no idea that anything is reparable. I mean, it is just, and I don't know, my teacher, Marsha Linehan, always says this word fragilization. And it's in a way like we can't tolerate any level of discomfort, or it's the reaction to say, you're dead to me. All I do in therapy is try to teach people not to do that in their relationships, right? Hey, hear them out, listen. And it's really complicated.
And now all these people who are literally 12 are online, and that's what they're learning, and they see that, and then imagine how they treat themselves. I mean, I'm sure you obviously know, like, how they're then treating themselves. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very slippery slope, and I don't know, it's just, I have to believe, I actually think Michael Bostic says this, like, we have a tendency of like swinging one way and then we swing the other. Absolutely. So I'm like, I think that we're coming out of it, because I don't know anyone in my personal life or like real life that is pro cancel culture, but it has done so much damage, not even to the people that person has offended or the person that's getting canceled. I think it's done more to the general public. Absolutely. Because then you think like, oh, you make one mistake, or even you can only be friends with people who think exactly the way that you think. And that in itself, I'm like, how are you ever going to grow? That's a very damaging thing. I'm not saying to be like friends with a horrible, like unhealthy. That's not what I'm saying. But like, you should be able to have people in your life that are from different cultures, are from different religions, different belief systems, different areas, and be able to like get along with them and have relationships with them. And cancel culture on one end is trying to like not offend everyone. And it's like, whatever it is, like what they're doing, but it's putting you in such a like I don't know, like a hole of isolation.
1,000%. It's there's this, first of all, this is the essence of diet culture, right? Yeah. Like, oh, I make one mistake, it's over, I should just go. Da, da, da. But the other thing that I think is happening in the diet culture version of this is toxic tribalism, right? Which is, I'm either so pro diet or I'm so anti diet, and the Buddhist idea of like the answer is never the opposite, it's always the balance, is just so lost on us. And again, like, that's a very slow, meticulous way of thinking, and it's just not supported by how we're living.
Yeah, it's very difficult. One of my best friend in the world, and my best friend from college, her name's Dom. Mm-hmm. She's
a podcaster.
Yes, she's also a podcaster. Mm-hmm. She was just my best friend from college. She posted a graphic during when George Floyd was murdered. What was that, June 2020? Yeah. Summer of 2020. And it went viral. And then all of a sudden she gains a following. She had already like been on my podcast and stuff. That's why she's been in that before. Then all of a sudden she gains this following. And she's also very anti-cancel culture, and we talk about it all the time. But it's crazy because you now get canceled for being against cancel culture. Like, you actually cannot.
Really?
Oh my God. It is like, it's insane. I will say a lot of it is like the TikTok audience, the younger TikTokers, because they're very impressionable and that's just what's normal. And
You're
you love
teaching-
someone, you hate them.
I literally feel like I'm in Mean Girls right now.
Yeah.
Like, you kids teach me so much.
It's pretty bad. I will say though, I think it's so important for anyone to do this, following or not. Like my quote job, or like even just like my online persona, it is me, but it's like I'm also like my own person outside of that, and that's not like what I find my identity in. And I have now so many friends around me that I like trust, and I'm not looking for validation, especially on the internet, or I'm trying not to look for validation on the internet. I don't know, it's just I feel a lot safer now by having like a good team around me, but it is a constant worry.
But I think my question, but I think my question is also a little bit more external than that, which is, I mean, now we're friends. I'm so glad you're taking care of yourself, right? Self-care is everything. But then there's this piece of, what about the idea that there are 12-year-olds and there are, little girls in 5th grade who are like, oh my gosh, me too. My parents got divorced. Like, this happens to me too. Like, I'm always balancing on such a smaller level than you. Like, where do you get that balance of this responsibility of your messaging to others?
Like online and offline?
Yeah. So you're saying like what I'm putting online, which is my personal brand, isn't actually my whole personality, which I understand completely. Like I don't say a word about a lot of parts of my life. I think about it too, which is like, and then everybody sort of thinks they know you, but they don't. Part of your brand is them knowing you, but also it's like, and I guess, I don't know, I just want to know everything you think and feel about that.
I think having your brand be yourself is a very dangerous thing. And I was like so young. I moved to LA when I was 17. Like I was so naive, which was the best thing because I was naive. So like I wasn't afraid. I was literally like, all right, I'm moving. Like I'm totally okay. And I think the recent Taylor Swift song, she's like, you know everything at 18 and nothing at 22.
That is so true.
And that is exactly what happened. And I think a lot of it was being naive that made things easier for me because I was naive. And I think the responsibility as far as putting things online, it's whatever I'm comfortable with. And as long as it's like true to me, I don't want to do something like I won't do something for an Instagram photo. I won't make a friend or take a photo, and I won't post a photo with a certain person for likes, validation, things like that. Like I'm very, you're either in my life or not.
I love that.
And then I don't know, I want people who are around me to leave feeling like maybe not special. The word I'm looking for is like valued, heard. I don't know. Like I want people to leave feeling better. And so with my social media, that's what I try to do. And I'm sharing things that I love. I can only share from like my experience. So I'm always doing that. I think it's been a lot less of, I'm not as like hard on myself now because I felt like I needed to share everything at one point, and then I realized that that's not healthy for anyone involved.
Did you tell your followers that you were backing off, or did you just do it naturally?
I just did it naturally.
You just did it naturally.
I don't even know how intentional it was. I just stopped.
And I think there's a part of it, right, where it's so I think what I want people to be hearing is like from you, from me, from everybody. It's like social media isn't life.
Yes.
Does this happen to you anytime I'll post a challenge? And I'll try to be like real authentic about it. Like you, post game, as close to game as I can feel comfortable. I feel like it's true. People will just have this like kind of pity party for me. And I'm like, no, I'm like sharing this because, you know what I mean? Yeah. They're like, oh, Molly. And it makes, does that ever happen to you?
Yeah. And like, I'm not posting this for pity. Like I'm like past that point of like wanting that. I'm like, maybe 6 months ago, but like, that's not what I want now.
I never want pity. Do you?
Yeah, no, actually, no. It doesn't make you feel good.
Yeah. I just want people to be like, go you.
Yeah, and I also think I have like too much pride to want pity. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily from the healthiest place, you know? But I don't like that. I don't at all.
Yeah, I know. And so, but I think in that way, like, I always think of behaviorism. Like, I'm not always reinforced to put up my truth because then my truth is like, oh my God, are you okay? Because people are so uncomfortable with uncomfortable feelings. So if I'm putting this like truth up there, like, oh, I'm not feeling well. And I don't know, it's probably something I need to work on within myself. I like always believe that if it's really bothering me, it's a me problem. But I'll put something in there and be like, oh my God, are you okay? And I'm like, I don't want all this attention about it. I want to help you, but maybe I need some attention about it. It's just kind of a struggle.
it is not, it's never like my goal. It's not what I want. And then I think I also feel very naked sometimes. I feel like for whatever reason, at certain points in my life, I felt a lot more comfortable being vulnerable versus others. I don't always know where that comes from. But I think actually just as I've gotten older, I'm like, okay, there are actually people watching this, people in my real life. Like, I mean, not that my friends are watching it, but like people in my real life are affected or involved, or like I won't ever share something if it's, for the most part, actually, no, I don't share things if it's like me and another person involved. Like I'll talk about my breakup on my end, but I'm not gonna talk about other things. And other people that I've dated, like that stuff is totally like behind closed doors. Like that's not the internet's problem. But yeah, I'm not looking for pity. It just makes me feel very naked and vulnerable, but like not in a, there's a way where that's scary and like that's like very Brene Brown, like, you know, vulnerability. But then there's also a time where I'm like, okay, that didn't feel good. That was not what I should have shared.
Yeah, but then you have a vulnerability hangover, and that's really where self-harm comes, right? I mean, that's true. I know that personally. I know that professionally. It's like, and I think what you're saying is.
I close my eyes after sometimes.
What's that?
I just like close my eyes and pretend I just look the other way.
It's just, know? Yeah, but I think, listen, I think what I'm understanding, and like it's just genius in a way, it's like there's just not a right answer right now. It's like the culture is such that it's so high exposure. Like, I see people sharing things and I'm like, you can't come back from people not knowing that, right? You can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. So I think on one hand, it's genius and wonderful that you're pretty thoughtful about what you're posting. I just think it's also, I just always think about the 12-year-old, the 15-year-old, the really vulnerable person who's like, Molly's life is so amazing, or, you know, Kenzie's life just looks so good and she looks so happy in that dress and I'm so unhappy. But I guess in a way, like, that's their path, right?
And there's only so much that you can control. Like, I think this just made me think of it. I went to like a Bible college, right? And so when I got out of that, I think I definitely overshared in some aspects, because now, and like very for whatever faith you want, I don't care. Like very open, I don't care.
You do you.
You do you. But after that, like there was definitely a lot of things that I had to work through of ways that it kind of screwed me up. And so after that, at the time I thought I was really happy with it. And I thought, you know, it was great. And I'm still like hesitant to talk about it because, you know, people hear this and then I don't want to get texts and whatever.
Isn't that amazing though? You're you're in this moment. Yeah. And listen, no one's asking you to do anything that makes you uncomfortable, but right? Like there's this little truth that you want to come out right now and you're like, I don't know if I have it in me.
But it's also one of those things that's like kind of scary because other people are involved. And it was something that at the time, and again, in certain ways, that was the best decision I've ever made. And it was also the worst decision I've ever made. And somehow those two have just married. Like, I'm really grateful for it. But regardless, like, there are things that I have still am in therapy for. I graduated over a year ago. And so I'm like, it's
just like as a therapist, can we just take a really mindful pause here? That's not a long time in therapy.
But
it's only a year.
Yeah, but for some reason I'm just like, all right, you know, it's the culture that we're in.
And I appreciate your type A personality. Yeah. Me too.
I'm like ready to move on.
I went to therapy because I hated myself, and the guy's like, we went to a treatment program for like, I don't know, 2 weeks, and he was like, I was like, I hate myself. Can you fix it? He's like, not in 2 weeks. I was like, I want to see your manager right now.
That does not work in my Google Calendar.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I really overshared on that, and I don't regret it because I think there's so many great things that have come from it. Actually, I do slightly regret it, but I regret it in the way that, you know, we're not allowed to change our minds, and I'm not even saying changing my mind on like what I believe necessarily. It's just that in itself has been difficult because as a human being have like walked through it, I felt like I couldn't change my mind, and that was so much of like. Now I've never been. Ever in my life, I've never identified as this like Southern conservative Christian. That's like so opposite of who I am to begin with. And even where I went is nowhere near that. So I think people like projected who they thought I needed to be onto me. And it really got annoying because it's also like, I have friends that are like that. They're great. But like couldn't be less of me. It's not me. Yep. And so that really was difficult. And so when I think of oversharing, you would think the obvious ones of like relationships or things, I actually think about my college experience. And that has been something that it's hard. And also it's like, I'm currently processing this in real time. I can't really process this on the internet with you guys.
Yeah, that's literally my first thought. I was like, I literally was like, I'm so excited to see how this particular thread turns out. Cause my thought always is like, I really don't regret the past, because I think, as we've talked about, like, it always ends up making a difference. Like, it never makes sense in the moment. It makes sense a little bit down the path. And I remember this, even I don't know if you know this about me, but I had bariatric surgery and I ate my way through it. I mean, I'm that kind of like food addict. And when I was writing my book, I just left it out. So much shame about it. Hadn't really told a lot of people about it. And basically, like, this like little angel came down and was like, something's missing from your book. And I had to like go and tell people. I do this whole thing. If I could tell you the amount of people who DM me on the daily to say, oh my God, I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only person who had failed at this, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, so that's my path. Ain't that the kicker? I think it's just complicated. What's your thoughts on like diet culture and all that? Can we get there? We haven't gotten there.
I mean, obviously I'm not an expert, but
that's okay.
Yeah.
But kind of like, aren't we all just sort of experts?
Yeah, sure.
Sadly.
I mean, yeah. I'm like, the internet thinks so. No.
Oh, I just loved you. I didn't know that I could love you more. It just happened. I had a total heartburst for you.
I think it's just very dangerous. And again, this is not like, I've never had an eating disorder. I've never had, like, I can't speak from like that experience, but just as a girl and like the society that we have,
right? It's
very tricky. And I remember like I remember in high school, this is like a memory that is so vivid to me. I remember we would be getting ready for parties and the girls would sit around and just talk about how much they hated themselves. And I was like 15, 16 at this time, and I never said anything. And I was like, I don't want to like there was something about it that just made me feel really uneasy. And I'm like, why do you guys like hate yourself? Also, the most beautiful girls like ever. Not that whatever, but like it's crazy. Like I don't know what your standard is if that's what you think. Yeah. And I really was like, I don't want that, and being around that. And also I just have been a lot more like cautious of having young girls follow me. Like I don't want to like be that. And not that I've always felt amazing or anything. And I think that this isn't always like the healthiest. I'm not saying like ignore your emotions, but it made me really intentional, because I was like, I like see the common thread within my friends who is like, it was so much of self-talk. Yeah. And so that was one thing that I'm like, I was moving to LA. I'm like, I really, really don't want to become like so hard on myself physically. I'm hard on myself in every other way, but that was the thing. I'm like, I really don't want to. So and again, I'm an all or nothing personality. So I've really tried to like steer clear of a lot of things. My mom also like thinks she's literally Gwyneth Paltrow at this point.
But that's something. No, just from a data perspective, right? You were I just want to say this to those listening. Like, you were raised with people who had very healthy body image. Yeah. And you don't have to the extent that outside of culture, you don't have I was raised with people telling me I was too big. I was raised that like when I was thin, they would buy me things. When I was fat, they wouldn't buy me. I was raised very, very oh my gosh, I'm totally forgetting. Very conditionally about my body.
My parents never even commented on my body ever. It was not, and I feel for that because I hear girls talking about that all the time. And my mom just didn't. And my mom is a very like holistic health. Like everything is like you and her would get along very well.
That's the nicest thing ever.
It's very much so in that realm. Yeah. So even like eating for mental health, like everything like comes from that. And so even like the way that I view food isn't really for like what I'm going to look like necessarily. And obviously I have like bad body image days and things, but because I knew that about myself from a young age and for whatever reason had that thought, I've just tried so hard to steer away from like negative self-talk. Not that I always have.
No.
But I didn't grow up in a house like that.
Negative self-talk about my body. I mean, now we've been friends almost 2 hours. I don't think that you don't have negative self-talk. So I guess my question is sort of like, when you think about craving and like you and I have said it, right? There's workaholism, there's shopping addiction, there's certainly drug and substance and food and eating disorder and people addiction, right? People pleasing. Like, what do you think we're really craving?
Maybe, acceptance or like, I don't know. Cause I think I always say like distraction, but that's not what you're craving. That's what you're like.
That's another drug, right?
Yeah. That's what you're using. I don't know.
I love the idea of acceptance.
Maybe acceptance or just like wanting to
What are you
feel.
craving?
I think mine, I feel like, okay, like my, one that isn't the root, like the symptom that whatever
Yeah.
would definitely be like achievement. And I think at the end of the day, it is maybe it's feeling worthy. Like it's a self-worth type of thing. And I think from a young age too, like that was something that was rewarded with me. But it's not my parents' fault. Like I just was always an
Good
overachiever.
Therapist.
Yeah, and then that was just something like I was really good at school growing. That's all I cared about. I was actually very shy when I was little, which is like if I tell anyone that, they're like, I don't believe you. Like I could talk to a wall at this point. I will go talk to anyone. It doesn't matter if you're like the most famous person in the world. Like I don't care like at all. But yeah, I think that I found a lot of my self-worth growing up and my identity in achievement. So I think for me, it would maybe be worth.
That's beautiful.
Do you think everyone's craving the same thing or do you think it's different?
I think they're both true. I think everybody's craving something different and everybody's craving the same thing. I think the end game is that we all just like want to be loved and love, pretty freely. So I think that idea of acceptance. And then I think we all have these individual stories. Like we all have this blueprint that like life gives us. And you and I have actually really similar ones even. I mean, this is what I love, the idea that we're more the same than we are different because we have such different upbringings. Yeah. But I was really rewarded. I hijacked being able to be really bullied or whatever by being really smart. Mm-hmm. And so I, for a lot of the things that like typical fat kids get, I got maybe 5% of it, the bullying, the being left out. And it still pretty much like tattoos me. And so I think I really understood if I can be smarter and faster, then I cannot be hurt. Mm-hmm. And so I think that my worth really got aligned with that. So yeah, I just think we're all craving like love and peace and nurturing and nourishment. And that's why we turn to these external things that give it to us really, really quick, like scrolling Instagram or eating too much ice cream or overscheduling ourselves or buying too much stuff. And it's really hard to not do that.
Yeah, just keeping yourself busy. I think using a lot of it was achievement, and that's how I found my worth. But also, look, I moved out early. Like, I just wanted to get out of my house.
I think it's amazing.
And so, but what I did was I knew that the one thing I can control, to some extent, not really, was my career. Mm-hmm. And so if I worked really hard at that, I would make enough money. I would be, quote, successful enough to move out early. And that was always my way of, even now I find myself, like, if my life is like out of whack, I am the one thing I can just work harder, and that's just what I channel myself into. So that's like, I know that is the issue, and I'm always working on it, but it is always my like fallback, you know?
But it's also like too much of that is not good.
Yeah.
But it's really like you're kind of important, like, right? You're here doing this beautiful messaging, this really important stuff. Me too, right? And I know that if I am feeling so burned out, that's me prioritizing the work over me.
Yeah.
Right? And then that's kind of the only problem. Wait, what do you think is the most valuable thing you've done, like a habit in the name of self-love and self-care and self-acceptance? You can name more than one.
Okay. Therapy, obviously, but I've said that so many times.
I mean, you can say, I think people don't listen. I'm an addictions therapist. We got to repeat ourselves a lot of times.
I think therapy has been the biggest thing.
Getting real help.
You don't
go to coaches, do you?
No, but maybe I should. I go to a therapist,
like a licensed person.
Yes,
great.
Yes.
That makes me so happy.
So therapy has been really helpful. Like the idea of, I think I've stopped in the past year. What's made the biggest difference for me, and this isn't necessarily a practice, but I can kind of explain how I did it, was stopping living life that I thought I wanted and that I thought I was supposed to be living. So that was one.
Wait. Can
big
you
idea.
That? Like,
so
I just think you're like a little deity right here. You're like baby Buddha. That's what I call you.
I was just in a very intensive program to where like at my school, like you were supposed to, and I don't even think it was intentional on their end. And I actually think a lot of it was, and like, that's not me like putting blame on myself. I just realistically knowing myself, a lot of it was, again, all or nothing. I put a lot more pressure on myself. And so I felt like I had to live this certain way, do this, marry this person, do this as my career, whatever it was. And there are people there who would adamantly did not tell me to do that and are great.
And there's so many 47-year-old women who are still living like this. So
yes.
I just want everyone to like listen to this. Like, I think it's very easy to be sitting and listening to a 24-year-old saying she doesn't know what she's talking about. And if you're listening to this right now, check that thought. soften to that thought right now, because what you're saying is so important. Because at 23 years old, you were like, oh, that's not it.
It kind of felt like a do-over too, because I always say I have the least amount of responsibility I'll ever have. And I think that every day. So like, and it informs every decision that I make, because I'm like, honestly, like it gave me a lot of freedom. Not that you can't change your life at any other time, but like, obviously I'm younger. So if I'm going to make changes, like now would be helpful. Doing that was really great. And then, I didn't realize how much I was living for someone else's idea of who I should be until I was like, wait, that's actually not what I want. And allowing myself to change my mind. I think it was so scary to change my mind. And I was like, I almost don't know who I was. I completely lost myself. I've always had like a very strong head on my shoulders, really thought I knew what I wanted. Obviously I didn't, like, you never really know. But this past year was when I was like the most confused about it, and I felt like a fish out of water, and I was like spilling all over the place. And it wasn't until the past few months that I started feeling so much better. Gratitude journal is like a huge thing. I don't even journal it every day. I just think it in the morning.
Well, it's a lot of habit now.
Yeah, it's a lot easier now that I'm actually happy, I will say. But like, it's one of those things that made a really big difference. Therapy, and also just being very open, I think, with like the right people in my life made it a lot easier for me. But I don't know. I'm like, I was like, I'm really young. I don't want to keep going in this direction that I don't want to be in, and that I don't even feel like I align with. And also, then I started like guilting myself and almost like hating who I was at that point. Yeah. And I was like, that girl, like, that's what I needed to do at that point. That was good for me then. It's just not now.
You know what they say? It could be doing something at 4:00 in the afternoon and doing something completely different at 4:01. I just want to change my answer as a result of this thing you're telling me. I think what we're really craving is our authentic self.
I couldn't agree more. That's actually it.
You know that Joseph Campbell, there's this, I'm so going to bastardize it, but he says, like, sometimes we have to trade out the life that we think that we should have for the life that we're supposed to have, or something like that. Yeah. And it's so reminding me of that. And when I think about the eating disorder and the addictions piece, it's like, because if I really am when I'm really with my authentic self and I'm embracing that part of me, I don't need to binge. Like, I don't want to have a drink. I'm not craving anything because I'm spiritually sound. I think that's exactly what you're saying.
I feel so uneasy when I feel, even in friendships, like I can't fake friendships. Yeah. I can't fake anything. I'm just
I would play terrible poker.
Literally.
I'd be like, the hand's really bad.
Yeah. I'm like, maybe I'm over this actually, guys. But yeah, that's the answer.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is where we end. I'm so sad about it.
I know.
I could do like 2 more hours.
I know. I could too.
You're a treat. I'm so excited that you're in our America doing our work for everybody. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Little baby Buddha. Okay, we're done. Thank you. That was great.
That was really good.
You're so special.